This episode of the podcast is brought to you by New Bloom Labs.
If you're a cannabis producer that's creating innovative products with multiple cannabinoids and needs the best, most comprehensive potency analysis there is, then you need to talk to the team at New Bloom Labs. New Bloom Labs understands the cannabis industry and what's important to growers, processors, and manufacturers. They offer the fastest turnaround time in the industry, and they recently announced the expansion of their standard potency panel that now reports 16 different cannabinoids. The new additions include CBD, VA, and both isomers of Delta-10 THC. If you're looking for precise, accurate analysis and the best turnaround time in the industry, then you need to call the team at New Bloom Lab. Call them at 844-TEST-CBD or visit their website at newbloomlabs.com. Superior science, rapid results, New Bloom Labs. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Chris Driessen, President and CEO at SLANG Worldwide Inc. Chris Driessen, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me, but doing great.
Awesome, man. I'm really excited to be talking to you today. And for those listening, like I mentioned, I have Chris Driessen on the phone. He is the president and CEO of SLANG Worldwide Incorporated, which is a cannabis consumer packaged goods company with a diverse portfolio of different brands as well. So, Chris, I think you're the first, major company in the CPG space. So I'm excited to explore your world and talk a little bit about what all you are doing, in the space.
I love talking shop, man. Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, before we start recording, I know you mentioned, it sounds like there's basically two offices. One, obviously, where headquarters is at in Canada, where y'all actually trade on the CNSX and the OTC markets. Right. And then also you're in Denver.
and OTC.
Yeah.
You got it. Yeah.
And then also you're where you're at currently, which is Denver, your other office.
That's right. So we've got, we're actually in 15 different markets. So 13 states, Canada, Puerto Rico. We do have an office in Toronto. Our nerve center, the mothership, as we call it, is here in Denver, where I'm sitting now. And then we've got production facilities, grows, distribution, kitchens, processing labs, etc., in our core markets, and those are in Oregon and Colorado.
Got you. Okay, so yeah, you guys got a footprint, all over the place, which is great. I mean, and it kind of speaks to the size in which and the market in which you're serving, right? It's a big space. So why don't you talk a little bit about SLANG Worldwide, the origin story, and really what specific services you provide?
You bet. So SLANG, as you mentioned, is a cannabis-focused consumer packaged goods company. And what that means is that we're purveying finished goods. They're branded goods. We have a house of brands, 6 leading brands that compete and win in some of the most competitive markets in the country. We have core markets, and what that means is that we're growing it, we're processing it, we're distributing it, we're doing everything ourselves up to wholesale. So we're vertically integrated through wholesale. And then in the other 13 markets that we're in, that's what we would call an emerging market. So we partner with a best-in-class operator, for example, a True Leaf down in Florida, and then we work with them using their infrastructure, their leadership to bring those products to market, and then we assist with selling and marketing those products through the market. So, and then we also have a pretty robust CBD, what we call a tea-free channel, where we're selling hardware, dry herb vaporizers, for example, with our Firefly toothbrush brand. And we do a really good clip of business with CBD due to our recent acquisition of Lunchbox Alchemy. So, as you mentioned, a lot of fingers and a lot of pies.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking as you're talking about these different lines of business. So like what was your initial start in the industry? I think I saw on your website there was this like timeline of events, right? And did I read correctly that it was extraction is where y'all first kind of had your footing in the industry?
That's exactly right. So the legacy company that Slang is now, subsequently acquired, started back in 2010, and that company is called Organo Labs. And to my knowledge, it's the longest continuously operated licensed CO2 extraction lab in the country. Keyword there is licensed, obviously, and and continuously operated. But yeah, there was an early focus on extraction. And you got to remember, back in 2010, nobody knew what the hell that meant. You had hash, you maybe had some Rick Simpson oil, a couple of edibles, and cannabis. That's really all there was. And so this concept of CO2 oil way back then was super avant-garde. And frankly, it wasn't super successful. Fast forward a couple of years to 2012, the science catches up of how do you refine oil? How do you distill oil? How does the technology, the vaporizing hardware came a long way during that time as well. And Open Vape was born. And Open, as it's called now, is one of the best-selling cannabis brands of all time. In fact, I think it's the second best-selling brand according to BDS Analytics. So that was our early kind of entry. Certainly our roots were here in Colorado at that time. And we did something a little differently than most other companies. Rather than try to make the next great product, we took the show on the road. So we started licensing all over the West Coast, California, Oregon, et cetera, and started taking that product. And our belief was the mousetrap of distribution, owning those consumer and customer relationships, allow you to then feed more things into that mousetrap. And certainly that's what we've done now. We make, like I said, we have 6 different brands, anything from flour to concentrates to vape pens to gummies, chocolate, ingestibles. And then we sell those things to thousands of stores across our markets.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned also that on that vertically integrated model, you also cater to not just the THC, but the hemp derived like CBD market as well, right?
We sure do. We closed an acquisition in Oregon called Lunchbox Alchemy, which closed this past October. OG Oregon edibles brand, premium, pectin, vegan, all the good things you would think of an Oregon edibles brand. Killer facility out in Bend, Oregon, which one of the great cities in this country. But they were doing a really robust clip of business. I keep saying they, I got to get used to saying us because now we're all one team, but they were doing a great clip. They're in 600 plus stores across 40 states, and it's with their CBD gummies, which are fabulous.
Yeah. Well, the fact that y'all have, you mentioned 6 different brands, right? That kind of cater to different formulations and ways of consuming cannabis. Like, in your perspective, what does it take to create a cannabis brand in a highly fragmented market, specifically like the CBD market, where we've seen so much entrance with, these small and even mid-sized players?
Yeah, I would tell you the 2 things are consistency and availability. We little joke inside the office. We always talk about the best ability is availability. If it's not there, if it's not on the shelf, if it's not at the place where I go, so many times a cannabis consumer, your decision is much like alcohol. You don't drive across town to go to the liquor store. You don't buy a 6-pack in the next suburb over. You go at the place down the street. And if they have what you're looking for and it's at a fair price, then you probably end up continuing to go to that place. So that's why we're very focused on some pretty standard CPG metrics around market share, total points of distribution, branded servings, branded unit sales, et cetera. So for me, it's availability. Next is consistency. You got to deliver on your brand promise. If I had a branded experience or a moment with one of your brands, say I was at a bachelor party in Las Vegas and we had your gummies. I see them again in Aspen when I went on a ski trip with my family. I expect them to make me feel the same way, which, as you know, is really difficult when you have a naturally variable product like cannabis. So it's our ability to have very strict proven processes, very strict SOP, and maintain a quality threshold so the consumer has the same experience time after time after time.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. And that's something that that specifically hasn't been raised, but it's an obvious one in that, like that example you gave, you're in Vegas with your buddies, bachelor party, whatever, you try a certain product, and then that same branded product in another state should have the same efficacy, right? But your point of the fact that the cannabis plant is so variable, obviously when it comes to growing it in a different climate or indoor versus outdoor greenhouse, different nutrients and water drip systems, all that kind of stuff plays a factor. And it sounds like what y'all do is try to make sure that, or you do make sure that that product is consistent, that process is consistent, because you're working directly with these partners and you have that kind of exclusive relationship, right?
You bet. I mean, look, there's a lot of smart men and women here that are, are chemists, that are different scientists, that are basically deconstructing this plant and then putting it back together in some form to replicate an experience. And again, we do this over across almost 100 SKUs. So the ability to do that with chocolate is different than what it is with the vape pen, is different than what it is in a pressed pill. So, we've got some, like I said, really sharp folks working here, and basically they put together those processes. But then we go over and above that. We do work with our partners. You mentioned the variability of all the things in the plant. Think about things like climate. In Oregon, and what we do there is very different just by the weather versus what we're doing here in Colorado, for example. The altitude is different, the temperature is different, the soil types are different. So the ability to take all of that data in and basically put something consistent out is something we really excel in. And then further to that, we do that across the country with our partners, where we'll go in, work with their teams, ensure that the quality thresholds are met, and just do a lot of behind the scenes work to make sure that our brands are best in class.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing in terms of, creating a successful cannabis business in this highly fragmented market is availability, like you mentioned, consistency in the product and its efficacy. And then it sounds like that third is just quality control and just checking and making sure that, these partners and people that you bring on, companies that you're acquiring, are maintaining that high standard.
Yeah, and I would say it's even more than that, right? It's relationships. Look, we're selling to almost 1,200 dispensaries. We've got products in almost 4,000 brick and mortar retail doors when you include CBD and hardware, et cetera. That's a lot of relationships to manage. And it's something we excel at, partially because we've been doing this for 11 years, right? You learn a few things along the way, but partially because that's in our DNA. That's who we are as a sales and marketing organization that has developed the capabilities to deliver products that are made with high science, that are safe, balanced, consistent, and clearly people love. So a lot of that is managing those relationships on top of obviously putting forward a great product.
Mm-hmm. And then the next natural step, kind of once you've implemented those kind of best practices when creating a business, is launching the business successfully, right? Again, there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of competition that has entered, specific, especially the CBD hemp side. So what does it take to actually launch and go to market successfully?
I mean, capital, leadership, organization, all the stuff. And look, even then, pardon me, there's no guarantee, right? So you've just got to be relentless with your passion and with your execution. And that's something we do really well. We shine on moving product through market. We make great products, but we're really good at putting those through the market as well. And that's a whole, host of different folks and people. The back of the house, as we call it, the lab's making great products. They're making them on time, and they're making sufficient to what our demand is, which is substantial. You gotta think too that we go through tons and tons and tons and tons, quite literally, of material. So to be able to produce that kind of volume, I mean, we did almost 250 million servings last year. Man, that's a lot of folks getting high on our stuff. So to be able to do that consistently and do that well takes an absolute, really well-run machine back of the house. That just gets it to market. These dispensaries that we work with, we're privileged enough to be on their shelf. They have no obligation to us to sell those products. That's our job, to get in there and promote, to make sure that we've explained and educated bud tenders, staff, what are our key differentiators, why mine versus the next brand. You mentioned it. There's a lot of noise out there. Honestly, that's really where we thrive. At its peak in Colorado, there were 155 vape pen brands. I want to say it's back in like July or so of 2016. Now I think there's 40. We've been number one since they've been keeping stats. And again, that takes an absolute team effort from both the front of the house and the back of the house working together. And then, of course, obviously all our great dispensary partners all over the continent.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And, you talked about how many products, I guess, y'all produced in the last year, or how many your customers consumed. And that's a huge number, right? And so my question is, having and operating 6 different brands, like, is there a difference among the demographics and the behaviors of the consumers of these different brands?
You bet. The person taking a press pill, the person dabbing live resin, the person using our Firefly disposable or buying flower through our partnerships with folks like Cookies, they're not all the same person. Now, what is common amongst those, all these folks are consuming cannabis, but it's different demographics, different socioeconomic statuses. Like that's one of the things, and obviously different locations, but that's really where we shine. I give you a perfect example. So when the pandemic hit, it was kind of a mess for the whole world and everything just kind of stopped. And you got to remember, Colorado was one of the early hotspots due to all the international ski tourism. You just had a lot of people going in and out. They shut the ski resorts down. It was a big kind of shockwave in the supply chain. And immediately everybody was kind of put into this turmoil. And then a lot of folks started losing their jobs, unfortunately. And there was a lot of uncertainty around people's financial status. Well, what we saw was that people didn't stop consuming cannabis, but what they were consuming changed. Right. So they were maybe buying a larger form factor, maybe a 1 gram vape cartridge instead of a half gram, because I don't really want to get out of the house and go into the store and kind of get out and about because I'm a little, maybe hesitant of what's happening health wise. And the other thing was they started buying cheaper things, more value focused products. And where SLANG shines is not only do we cover all the top categories in cannabis, we also segment our brands. So for example, Lunchbox Alchemy, as I just mentioned, is a premium edibles brand, whereas our existing edibles brand, District Edibles, is a value-based brand. And all that really means is it's difference in ingredients, still top notch, still safe, still, is going to do the job. But one of them has, basically pectin. One of those has gelatin. So there's just a difference in cost. One's organic, one's not, So the reality is we want to give consumers choice first and foremost. And it really depends largely on where you're standing. That not everything sells as well as it does in other places. So being able to have that flexibility and same thing, like I mentioned with vape, when people started buying bigger form factors but cheaper stuff, I make a live resin pen, I make a cannabis derived pen, I make a botanical pen. So great, I can cover the bases regardless of where that consumer would like to go in their journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it makes me think about the challenge that y'all would be up against operating a brand in, say, lack for a better word, that low cost product space, right? Mm-hmm. Because of the noise. I feel like that's where the noise is the most. It's with the lack, with the lack of FDA regulation, it's kind of the wild, wild west. People are just throwing products out there, some of which or most of which that have little to no CBD at all. So, going back to what you were talking about earlier, being on the shelf at a reputable dispensary, of course, being transparent with your labeling, right? And having those QR codes and the COAs are important, because that's where I think it's really muddy right now, especially on the hemp side, is that low cost side, because you don't know what you're getting, especially on places like Amazon, gas stations, things like that.
Yes. You nailed it, specifically on the CBD side, because you don't have the same regulations, and in most of our states, we're required to test. We're required to do all our homework, so to speak, to give this product the best shot at being safe. And then we have our own internal measures that go over and above what's expected of us to make sure that that is the case for our consumers. Obviously, their safety, their health is our number one priority, but I want them to be more than that. Yes, obviously cannabis can do a whole world of good, has a lot of medical benefits, but it also just helps your head, right? I'd much rather you pick up a joint than pick up a beer. It's just what it is. So we take that responsibility very seriously, but it's tough, especially on the CBD side, because you don't have all those same requirements. You do have a lot of, frankly, charlatans out there that are selling snake oil. And so to the average Joe walking in, they don't know that. They don't know what that means. What is 25 milligrams? I see some of the crazy, you look on Amazon, 4,500 milligrams in your, and it's like, there's 4.5 grams of CBD in this little bottle of like, I don't even know if that's physically possible.
Right.
And it's just nonsense. But in a lot of ways, man, I think that honestly, a lot of that noise in some ways is actually good for us, because when you had all those vape pen brands here, people walk in and are like, whoa, there's like 40 different brands on the shelf of pen. Man, I'm going to stick with O-Pen because I know that one. Like I'll just do that. because they know what they're going to get. It's been around forever. And the reality is it's a great product. So in a lot of ways, some of that noise allows us to set ourselves apart, particularly on the THC side. But on the CBD side, that's a problem that's out there, and it's something that we use education to overcome. And then once people experience our products, they're pleased and they come back and do it again, and we continue to deliver on that brand promise, and that's what builds brand loyalty.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, that's got to be a great position to be in if you have that brand recognition, being in the market and playing in the space for so long with all that added competition that comes in, that's half the battle,
You bet.
Other companies obviously aren't that fortunate, and they're having to deal with that noise and differentiate themselves. And you touched on education. And in my view, that's one of the most important things I think right now, as this great momentum that we're seeing in the industry, because it's an opportunity to educate new consumers that are entering, right? But also like to educate our policymakers and really start to allow more of the masses to understand the efficacy and the value of the plant from a medicinal, or environmental and economic standpoint. So
No doubt.
is there anything that you guys are doing from an education standpoint, whether it's industry facing or even, direct to your consumers, to educate them around the differences between, say, THC versus CBD or the other minor cannabinoids?
Absolutely. And this is a critical part of what we do is, first of all, you got to understand what you're getting. So I'll start with our customers. Our customers are largely dispensaries. So when we start to put product into a dispensary, we always go in and trade the bud tenders. We do that in person, but we also do that through a program called Learn Brands, which is basically an online learning platform to where you get a presentation. It teaches you about what the product is. You take a little quiz to show that, hey, you've retained the information. It's also a great way for us to, for example, hand out samples. Can't wait for you to try this product, but I want you to know something about it so you can tell somebody else something about it.
Right.
So we do that behind the scenes. Consumer facing, which of course are the end users. Florida is a great example of this with Trulieve. You have a little bit of an older demographic that's walking into the dispensaries in Florida just due to the population. And a lot of these folks just don't know, what the heck is a terpene and why do I care? So we have books like Cannabis 101 books that just say, hey, here's an indica plant, it's short, it's squatty. Here's a sativa plant. Here's what that means. Here's what the difference in experience is. Here's kind of the array of terpenes and why you should care about these things. How does it taste? How does it make you feel? There's more to this plant than just THC. And you start to see that as markets mature, like almost every market that opens up that's medical. What's the strongest, cheapest thing you got? It's like, hey, let's all get the Everclear of weed. And the reality is almost none of us are drinking Everclear at home because our palates, our tastes have been refined. And we know that, hey, maybe a glass of Merlot or a nice IPA fits you better than a shot of Everclear.
Yeah, we're not in college anymore.
It's no different. Thank God. Thank God. But yeah, so air education is a huge piece of what we do, but we do that both behind the scenes with our customers and very much front and center with our consumers, because we want them to know, and you have a right to know as a consumer, what's going into your body. And I want to let you know that and come through the front door, and I tell you that on the labels, and then we educate you on what that means.
That's great. Yeah. And it sounds like a really cool program that you guys have with Trulieve, right? In Florida, where you're actually in the dispensary talking directly to these consumers that are coming in and educating them around your products and what they do,
Yeah.
And that's great. So where do you think, do you predict any type of consolidation in 2021? I mean, obviously we're under a new administration. We've seen the blue wave hit with the Democrats taking over the Senate, and there has been talks, right, at the federal level of putting bills forth that talk about reform. So, what are your predictions? What's going to be first, and how is that going to impact the industry, as well as consolidation of some of these smaller players that maybe are bad actors in the space as well?
Yeah, consolidation was happening well before this. And gosh, even, with the previous administration, that was happening for quite some time. And that's just kind of the natural evolution of the industry at large. I do think there's a lot of cautious optimism right now, certainly with what's happened with the new administration. I think the first thing most likely to get out of the gate is the SAFE Act, which, look, holy cow, banking's been a a pain in the rear for almost all of us at one point or another. You don't talk to a soul that owns a plant touching cannabis business that doesn't complain about 280E. You know, it's a draconian tax policy that is unfair. It's nonsense.
It's insane. Yeah.
And when you look at some of these businesses, ourselves included, who are weathering the storm, who are overcoming all of these handicaps and still able to do what we're doing, imagine once there's a little bit of macro tailwinds or the removal of some of those impediments. So I think safe banking is probably likely to come first. With that, I expect there to be, tax reform, obviously, better access to banking. That also allows a lot of institutional money that's sitting on the sideline right now, particularly for the pubcos, to then enter the space. There's a ton of capital out there, and a lot of it, frankly, just can't touch cannabis due to the federal illegality and its status here still in the United States. So any positive reform obviously would be welcome news, but I think SAFE's probably the first thing to get done.
Yeah, I think you're spot on that. They're gonna start slow, and those are huge wins. I mean, in itself.
Hey, we'll take it, brother. Absolutely.
We'll take what we can get, and I feel like when some of those reforms are implemented, right, there's gonna be some unintended consequences, right? And one of which is going to be specifically in your space, other blue chip legacy, CPG players out there. They're going to enter the cannabis space. So how does SLANG, plan to compete against some of those legacy operators that are outside of the industry?
Man, we love it. Like, come on with it. Like, this is where we thrive, is in competitive markets. We are in some limited license markets, and we do really well there too, really well there as well. But, where we really thrive is when it's an open playing field. Bring all challengers, man. Like, we're ready. And I will tell you this, as you see the blue chips and the larger players, the P&Gs, the, et ceteras that start to come into the space, what is going to be really attractive to them? Is it that I have a grow of whatever size in Colorado? Is it that I've got, a 15,000 square foot processing facility in Bend, Oregon? Or is it that I'm commanding market share in the, in the hundreds of millions of servings? That's what's of value to those folks. So whether you get yourself to a point where you're able to compete, or whether you get yourself to a point where you're an attractive acquisition target, in the end, we believe that the multiple on brand typically exceeds in most mainstream markets our distribution or retail counterparts. You haven't seen that yet in cannabis. So, TBD if we're proven right on that. But more than that, when these groups do come in, what's of value to them? What are they really looking for? Philip Morris has plenty of acres to grow whatever it is they want to grow once they decide they want to grow it. So to me, that's not our core competency. That's not where we shine. But we do shine in brands. We do shine in branded servings. And that's attractive and has value regardless of who you're talking to.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because it's a lot to kind of, as a company that doesn't focus, specifically on this sector and is not familiar with the compliance issues and regulatory, the hurdles that you have to jump through. Someone like SLANG, who's, gotten their foothold and got comfortable market share and has been doing this, that makes sense. There's a lot of value add there, right? So,
and think about the relative size of these two companies too.
Yeah.
If you're looking at a Procter & Gamble or a Coca-Cola or pick any brand aggregator, these are all multi-tens of billions of dollars market cap companies. Cannabis just not there yet in the most part. So for them, it's a lot easier just to come in and scoop it up than it would be to, you learn a few things over the past 11 years. So if it's ultimately a rounding error on your balance sheet, why wouldn't you come scoop it up? Now, all of that being said, we're not out actively looking to get acquired. We're out building our business. We're out staying on our path, executing on our strategic plan. We'll take those things as they come. But we do believe in the end, market share wins the day.
Sure. Yeah. So what is SLANG's plans for 2021 and beyond? I mean, we're seeing a lot of states that are up for vote when it comes to adult use. New York being one, New Mexico, Pennsylvania. There's that whole kind of East Coast domino effect, right? So where do you see SLANG moving into some of these emerging markets, and what's the plans for 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, we're all over the East Coast now. So Vermont, Maine, about to be in Massachusetts with Trulieve, Ohio, which I guess technically is more of the Midwest, and then of course Florida. So we're going to be entering in more of those states and in our conversations to do that now. But I think you're right. Like it's you're kind of seeing that domino effect, particularly on the East Coast, because a lot of the West has already been won, so to speak. So with states legalizing, look, if somebody puts a lab on the moon or a license on the moon, we want to go. We want to ride shotgun with every dispensary in the world in time. So we certainly prioritize those by population and regulation, et cetera, but expect us to go into all of the above. And again, that's really where we thrive, is when there's open markets, when there's a competitive, market out there. Those are some of the places that we do the absolute best. I mean, we're in almost 700 stores between Colorado and Oregon alone, and those are two of the oldest markets in the country.
Yeah, no, that's really impressive, those numbers. If you want to talk about getting a license and getting your product in dispensaries on the moon, I'd talk to Elon Musk. Maybe you can hitch a ride on SpaceX, and you guys can work something out. I'm sure he'd be open to it.
Man, that's my dog. I hope so, man. You asked another question. You said, "Hey, what are we doing in 2021? What are and beyond?" And I'll actually start in reverse. So we do something called BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. So we set our 1-year goals, our strategy. Those really aren't BHAGs at that point. That's just what we're coming to do this year. So then we set 3 years out. Where will we be? 5 years out. Where will we be? Our biggest goal 5 years from now is I want to be getting everyone that's of age on this continent high once a week, period. So take the population in North America, divide by 2 to get rid of the youth, and a 5 milligram serving is what we consider that. So whatever that number is divided by 5 milligrams once a week, I want to be distributing that amount of cannabis. And that's just a ton of branded moments. Right. And what an incredible platform to build upon. So that's our biggest goal. Shorter term, we want to be top 5 in everything that we do in every place that we do it. So this year, specifically by the end of the year, we're already number 1 in vape in Colorado. We're top 10 in Oregon. I want to be top 5. We want to be top 5 also in edibles in both states. We are in Oregon, but I want to be in Colorado as well. So it's really putting a lot more of our existing products into our existing markets, and then driving the brand awareness and the market share of those things. We don't do anything where we're not top 20 in. Now, some of those things like pills, ingestibles, I don't even know if there's 20 pill companies. So it's like, hey, cool, you're number 5 out of 8. So great. But we always want to continuously improve on that. And I think a key differentiator for SLANG is a lot of these businesses have, hey, I've got a vape pen that's well sold, or a gummy that's in a lot of different places. We got 100 different things under 6 brands in 15 different markets in thousands of places. So when you look at the number of brands times the number of products times the number of places that those can be found, that's a class of 1. That's us. Right.
Yeah. You got more fingers in the pie, as you mentioned earlier.
Right.
Right. So that's a good position to be in, Chris. No, I appreciate, everything you've shared today. I want to give you the floor before we wrap up. And is there anything that you want to leave the audience with?
Sorry, man. Basically is from a company perspective, we have some really exciting things going on. We are converting into plant touching. So we've started making acquisitions that brought us into the plant touching realm, which is a material shift in our revenue. That's exciting. We're entering into new states. We're going to be going into California, Massachusetts, and Michigan this year with best in class, Trulieve, Gage, Natura Life and Science. So we're executing on our plan. So a really exciting time from a company perspective. And then obviously from the world's perspective, hopefully COVID's going to be in the rearview mirror soon. And I think that just gives everybody a little more confidence to get out and get back to doing what we're doing. The good news is that we've executed all along the way. So, I would just encourage people, if you're not familiar with our story and why we're unique, look into this. We do things other people don't do.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And where can I know we talked about when we first started recording about where they can find your company on the Canadian exchanges if they wanted to invest, and then also your website information and social media.
You got it. So it's SLANG, www.slangww.com for SLANG Worldwide. We're listed on the CSE with the ticker SLNG. We're listed OTC with the ticker SLGWF. And social media, look, it's all about the brands. The brand, we do have LinkedIn and stuff for Slang. Stars of our show are the brands. So Open, District Edibles, Lunchbox Alchemy, Baked Concentrates, Pressed Pills, and Firefly. Those are our 6. And then we also distribute for other people like Cookies and a few other folks as well. But yeah, look it up by the brand. They're the stars of our show.
Boom.
And thank you for having me. I appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, you heard it from the man himself, Chris Driessen, President and CEO of SLANG Worldwide Incorporated. Man, I really enjoyed talking with you. And, this is an exciting year, and it's going to be exciting for the years to come. So definitely want to have you back on if you're open to it as things evolve. Always. And as you guys expand,
I love it, man. I love it. Look forward to it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much again, Chris, and thank you all for listening. Bye.
Thank you.